Hello everybody, you're listening to The Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. This is the weekly radio show where we chat about the local arts news. We have a different guest on each week. We head over to the Rye Zone for a short story and or some poetry. We catch up with Twangling Jack Ford over in the Oak Shed for a weekly album review, and we play local, unsigned and or independent music. As always, you can find us on Facebook. If you search for The Art Show on Wickham Sound, you should be able to find us. And we are repeated on Wickham Sound on Monday nights. We're on the Wickham Sound Listen Again, iTunes, Spotify and wherever else you get your podcasts. Please do leave us a short review on your podcast platform of choice. You can always find us on Facebook. If you search for The Art Show on Wickham Sound, you should be able to find us. I think I already said that, but I'm going to say it again. And you can email me here at the studio on dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. That's dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. So this week we have a highlights show, but before we get to the highlights, we're going to head over to the Rye Zone for the first instalment of Black Solstice, which is a Christmas-themed horror story by myself, Dane Cobain. Black Solstice. I'm dreaming of a black solstice. Bling Crowley. Tell us again, Daddy. Oh no, it's far too late for that. Please? Well, okay. John Reed was sitting on an uncomfortably small chair at the foot of his daughter's bunk bed. It was late, it was cold outside, and he had an important meeting in the morning. He stroked his powerful hand through his beard and glanced automatically at his wristwatch, which was illuminated by a My Little Pony lava lamp. Tupac, the family cat, was nestled in the lower bunk, curled around Jesse's feet like a black spot in the pages of a Bible. He sighed. What story do you want to hear? He asked, though he already knew the answer. There was only one story that the two of them could possibly want to hear at this time of year, and he was the only one who'd tell it. His wife, Mildred, believed the old superstitions and said it was bad luck. Daddy, Daddy, little Jessie said, her eyes staring out from the darkness like two bright beacons of hope and innocence. Tell us the story of Satan Claus. Satan Claus, he replied, raising an eyebrow. Aren't you a bit old for that? No, Daddy, no, Jude said. Go on, tell us the story. Okay, John said, shrugging his shoulders and shifting uncomfortably in the chair. Well, the story goes like this. Back in the olden days, a long, long time ago, before you were born. Yes, John chuckled softly, feeling his age along with an ache in his back from where the cold weather and the storm front had taken its toll. Long, long before I was born. So what happened? I'm getting there, John replied. It goes back to the Bible. Adam's first wife, Lilith, flew into a tremendous rage after God created Eve, and God punished her for her jealousy by making her mortal. But then, as she wandered the earth alone and in the depths of her despair, Satan went to her in the form of a goat and asked her to drink his blood. And did she? Yes, John said. The unholy blood was too much for her and it killed her. But though her body died, her spirit lived on, and she was doomed to spend the rest of eternity at his side, feasting on the blood of children, just like you two. The two girls shuddered in their beds, and John Reed felt the beginnings of a smile in spite of himself. Scaring children during solstice season was a tradition as old as time itself, and if the legends were true, it served a purpose. Lilith is the mother of them all, John continued, the she-devil, Mrs. Claus. They say she still sleeps beside him in their double coffin, hiding from the deadly sunlight as they wait for the winter solstice, the longest night. When they can, they add others to their cause, corrupting their victims with a bite and creating creatures of the night. Your granddad? Grandad Woodinge? No, Jessie, John replied. Grandad Bygrave. He used to be what they called a staker. It was his job to search the cemetery for little air holes or disturbances amongst the graves at St. Editha's. When he found something, he had to dig up the grave and put a stake through the heart of the poor unfortunate that was buried beneath the soil. Ew. That's nothing, John said. In some other places, very far away from here, they decapitate their dead to make sure that they don't come back. What does decapitate mean? Never you mind, John said. In Italy, the doctors wash their hands with communion wine. When their patients die, they break people's legs and bury them upside down. That's gross, Daddy, Jude scolded, pouting at him as she put her little hands over her ears. Well, it's a small price to pay, John said. It's better for you to know these things. The vampires are dangerous, with superhuman strength and speed. They're also immortal. What does that mean, Daddy? It means they don't die, John replied grimly. He thought once again about whether he was telling them too much, but then he reminded himself that, like the birds and the bees, it was just one of the facts of life that they needed to know. According to the legends, John continued, if someone died and their body was left unguarded, they'd turn into a creature of the night. Your other granddad, Grandad Woodinge, used to work as a watcher. A watcher? Yes, Jude, John said. He'd stand guard over the dead with a lit candle, watching day and night until it was time to bury them. He used to hold a loaded shotgun and keep watch for animals. Like rabbits? Uh-huh, John replied. And cats and dogs too. The old-timers say that if an animal jumps over a body before it's buried, it will turn into a vampire by the following night. They say a lot, Jude said. John paused for a second and smiled in the darkness, struck again by just how smart his kids were. They were little prodigies, clever clogs who'd been raised on classical music since their time in the womb, even though he knew the Mozart effect was a steaming pile of bull. But they'd played Mozart to the girls anyway, just in case the scientists were wrong. Is it true that only bad people become vampires, Daddy? No, Jesse, John said. They used to say that only those who'd led evil lives or who'd refused religion could become vampires. They suspected witches of being vampires too, but we know better, don't we, girls? Yeah, Jude said, sticking a thumb in her mouth and looking out at her dad from the top bunk. Grandma Woodinger's a witch, and she keeps us safe from Satan claws. Exactly, girls, John said. So there's nothing to worry about, is there? Nuh-uh. Good, John said, yawning slightly and stretching out his arms. Now, I think that's enough for one night, isn't it? Besides, we can't let your mother know we've been talking about Satan claws again, or she'll have my guts for garters. What does that mean, Daddy? Never you mind, John repeated, his moustache twitching as he suppressed a laugh. Now, go on, you two. It's time for you to go to sleep. Sweet dreams. Simply having a terrible solstice time. Paul McStake in the Hartney. On Solstice Eve, the two Reed girls were running around in the garden and playing in the snow when they saw a magpie in the trees. It was soon joined by another, and then another. The birds lined up like black-gowned judges waiting to pass sentence on the children. Jude nodded at her sister and the two turned and saluted to the birds. Then they started to sing together in a cherubic harmony, their time in the church choir shining through as they worked their way through the rhyme. 1 for sorrow, they chorused, 2 for joy, 3 for a girl, 4 for a boy, 5 for silver, 6 for gold, 7 for a secret never to be told, 8 for a wish, 9 for a kiss, 10 a surprise you should be careful not to miss, 11 for health, 12 for wealth, 13 beware, it's the devil himself. Magpies are always bad luck, Jessie grumbled. Like breaking a mirror, Jude replied. Exactly. There was a sharp gust of wind and the magpies took off, their departure leaving a heavy silence that settled over the garden like a fog. Both of the girls were wrapped up warm, but they shivered in tandem as the sun sauntered behind a cloud and cast the garden into shadow. They looked to the snowman they'd built for comfort, but there was no warmth to the coal that he had for eyes, and the twigs they'd used for his arms looked brittle and uninviting. Let's go inside, Jessie said. The inside of the house looked like an explosion at a jumble sale, with all sorts of weird and wonderful items scattered throughout it. The decorations were mostly in red, green and gold, symbolising the blood of Christ, the eternal life of the evergreen tree and the gifts of the three magi. The initials VM for Virgin Mary had been carved repeatedly into the wooden door and window frames. The banister, which crawled lazily down a steep and narrow Edwardian staircase, was carved with obscene phalli, stiff and floppy dicks saluting the girls every time they ran upstairs. Mildred didn't like them and had begged her husband to get rid of them, but he'd always overruled her because of the old apotropaic superstitions. That's why he'd also agreed to bury an old boot outside the back door. What's the difference between an amulet and a talisman? Jude asked, as the girls raced up the stairs towards their playroom. One's got an N in it? Well, that too, Jude replied, but that wasn't what I meant, silly. So what's the difference? A talisman brings good luck, Jude said, and an amulet wards off evil. So which one do we need? Jessie asked. Jude shook her head grimly and said, both. 'Twas the night before solstice, when all through the shack not a creature was stirring, not even a bat. Clement Van Helsing. The house smelled like garlic. A silver chalice sat on a silver tray on a table in the kitchen. It was filled with a clear liquid, holy water from the healing springs of Lourdes, and 2 communion wafers sat on a silver plate beside them. A wooden crucifix lay between the two of them. It was midnight on the morning of December 21st. The house was one of several dozen that were nestled beneath a blanket of snow over Greyfriars Close in the rest of Mile End. Upstairs, in their bedrooms, the Reed family slumbered on. John Reed was fast asleep, his moustache net holding his precious curls out of his nose and mouth. Mildred, his wife, was asleep beside him, though she was twitching. In the other bedroom, the twins were still awake, and they were terrified. Jessie and Jude were 7 years old, and they were just about old enough to still believe in Satan claws. Some of the children at school had said that Satan was made up by capitalists to sell more products, but Jessie and Jude kept themselves to themselves and didn't give a hoot what the other kids said. Perhaps Satan Claus was just their father in a silly suit, but then again, perhaps not. And they didn't want to take the risk and then find out that they were wrong. John Reed had told them that they were taking Pascal up on his wager. They hadn't known what he'd meant at the time, but then they'd asked Mr. Griffin at the school and he'd told them all about it. It made a lot of sense after that. Perhaps Satan Claus didn't exist, but then again, perhaps he did. If they took the right precautions and he did exist, they had a shot at surviving. If he didn't, well, they'd just look a little silly. And Jesse and Jude didn't care if they looked silly, as long as they survived. And so they'd stayed up late on Solstice Eve, roaming around the house and performing the final touches, scattering salt circles around their beds and polishing all of the mirrors. A couple of weeks earlier, they'd found some sticks while they were walking by the river, and they spent the days between sharpening the sticks with their daddy's penknife. Luckily for them, he hadn't caught them. They'd hung a silver horseshoe above their bedroom door, polished every shiny surface until they could see their faces, and placed mirrors by the doors and windows. In the back garden, tear-shaped Nazars hung from trees, channeling the old magic to protect the house from the glare of the evil eye. The house was festooned with images of Christ, and they'd woven St. Bridget's crosses out of rush to hang in each of the rooms. In their bedroom, a homemade dream catcher made of yarn hung above their bunk bed, occasionally bopping Jude on the head if she sat up in the night. Blown glass witch balls hung in every room, and so did bunches of wildflowers, including branches of ash, oak, wild rose, white heather and hawthorn. Jessie had even asked her daddy to bring her some clippings from the aspen tree at the bottom of the garden. "Does it have to be aspen?" he'd asked. "Of course," she'd replied matter-of-factly. "That's the same kind of tree they used to make Jesus' cross, Daddy." They'd scattered mustard seeds on the floors and even convinced their parents to leave the taps on, thanks to the old story that vampires couldn't cross running water. They'd also asked their mother if they could hang some mistletoe, but she'd refused. Mistletoe is a patriarchal tradition designed to apply social pressure to young women until they agree to kiss old men, she'd insisted. I mean, the juice in the berries represents for goodness sake. What's mummy? Never you mind. But the girls were hopeful that they'd be able to wear her down eventually, just like they'd done with the gun and the silver bullets. The two girls had been making zero headway until they presented their mother with a series of charts and graphs that showed the prevalence of home invasions. She'd relented after that, and she'd been their key weapon when it came to convincing their father. John Reed would have done anything for his daughters, and so he'd purchased an illegal firearm from a guy called Silky at the local boozer. He kept the gun and the holy bullets inside a shoebox in the drawer of his bedside table. That afternoon, Mildred cut her hand while helping her daughters to bake communion wafers. She tried to hide it from them, to cover the wound with a plaster before they noticed, but the twins' eyes were as sharp as their intellects, and before she'd even removed the first aid kit from the kitchen cupboards, they'd told her what she needed to do. "You did an oopsie, Mummy," Jude said. "You know the rules." And she did know the rules too. It was said that any wound left untreated with boiling water was enough to let the evil in, and so the traditionalists poured boiling water over graves during funerals. In the Reed household, it meant that she had to pop the kettle on and take a couple of aspirin. That night, she was sleeping with a bandage around her hand. That was the first instalment of Black Solstice by myself, Dane Cobain. You're listening to The Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound, and this is Betty Accorsi with King Arthur Walks in Rottingdean. That was Olanzapine by Without My Addiction, and before that we had King Arthur Walks in Rottingdean by Betty Accorsi. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host Dane Cobain, and this week we have a highlight show, so we're going to go straight over to a highlight of our chat with horror author Regina Saint Claire.
Cool, so going back to your zines, can you tell us what a zine is?
A zine is short for magazine, and it's something, I guess it would probably reached its heyday in the 80s, maybe earlier, 80s, 90s, but there were these homemade publications. I know when I was in college, there were a lot of zines that were made by the art students. They would just be cheaply printed. On those days, it would be like Xeroxed.
Mm-hmm.
And if anyone, not Xerox, what am I talking about? Mimeograph. Like purple mimeograph. In fact, when I started my zine, I thought, I got to get a mimeograph machine and do it right. And then I came to my senses. But and there is just like that wonderful that homemade vibe is something I really missed, because so much of what we do and publish is digital and online. It's kind of like the appreciation for vinyl records. Zines, like old school zines to me are kind of like that. In fact, I went to StokerCon and I sold some zines, and then at the last day I just said, I'm just going to walk around and meet people and give them a zine. And I chatted with Brian Keene and gave him a zine, and he was like, oh wow, this is great. You know, I hope he wasn't just BSing me, but he seemed very sincere, so I'm hoping he read it. But he's like, I have a whole bunch of these zines in my basement. You know? It's something that I think is fun. It's like a fun thing, and it's all through the mail. In fact, I'm only accepting submissions through the mail, which has cut down on it tremendously, because I do offer a pro rate for, in case you want to contribute something, Dane, fiction and essays. And when I put out the first announcement, I received 600 and something short stories, which was insane. So now it's only through the mail, and I do receive, I think I have about 10 that I'm looking at. So it's much more manageable, but it's fun.
Yeah, for sure.
That was a highlight of our chat with horror author Regina Saint Claire, and here is part of our conversation with poet and poetry editor Nikki Dudley.
But how long have you been writing, and where did you get your start?
I mean, I've always loved writing. I'm sure all writers answer with that. But I think, though, I'd started taking it more seriously. Probably my degree was the first time really where I thought, oh, okay, you can actually write stuff properly. It's not just like something that you do, you know, as a hobby, I guess. So I think, I went to Roehampton, so that was a huge thing. It was great. It was the first time I kind of had to show my work to people, get feedback, and the lecturers there, I think, had a big influence on me as well, because they showed me lots of amazing stuff, which I never would have discovered by myself, or it would have taken me a very long time to find those things. So I think doing that and then staying on to do an MA really kind of cemented that you can be a writer. I mean, it might not be your full-time job, and most of the time it isn't, but you are a writer regardless, and you can get your work out there. Obviously, it resulted in me setting up a magazine as well, which has been fantastic. That makes you feel a bit more like a writer as well, I guess, because you're kind of in that world, and you have to keep publishing stuff in a way because you're an editor, and it feels like you have to keep contributing and being in that community. So I think, really it was the degree that started it off for me properly, to think, oh, I'm a writer and I need to own that term a bit more.
That was part of our chat with Nikki Dudley, and here is part of our catch up with Cub Coffee.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine. I mean, just going to a festival, you're exhausted after just attending one. So, you know, working one, I can't imagine. I'm glad I've never had to do it personally.
Well, I'm a one-woman band, and I do rope in lots of family members to come and help out, and the vegan food and drink trader community is so lovely. But it's a lot for me on my own, definitely.
Cool. So what have you got planned sort of for the rest of the year?
So I'm having a week off, which is wonderful. I'm very chuffed about that. And then come September, we're back into the normal schedule of vegan market. So I work with lots of different companies. And also we've got Reading Vegan Festival coming up on the 16th of September. So that's always a fantastic day out. I think you've been before, so you know all about that one. And then just back to the regular schedule and focusing on the next step for Cub Coffee come January time, which is very exciting. So hopefully there may be Cub 2.0 coming very soon.
Awesome. Can you give us any teasers about that, or is that all very, very hush
well
hush?
It's very, very early stages, but yes, there will be more. That's all I can say. There will be more.
Cool. That was part of our catch-up with Cub Coffee, and here is part of our conversation with Ieva Pakalniskite. I think I said that right, from Ieva and Jethro.
And do you guys like, do you just do covers? And if so, is there ever any plans to kind of create some of your own originals?
At the moment, we are just doing covers. There are plans for maybe jazzifying some modern songs, potentially. But potentially in the future, there might be some originals. It will probably be a long way off, though.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine it'd be hard to do that as well. And again, like going back to everything that you do is so kind of grounded in that time period, you know. It's got to be hard to actually put yourself in that mindset to write a sort of 40s and 50s style song when, you know, you got your smartphone next to you and, you know, the life is so different.
It's tough, but there are people doing it. So if you look at Gregory Porter, for example, he is a modern jazz singer, and his originals are absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
And there are people doing it. It's possible.
Yeah,
it just needs to maybe address different issues.
Yeah,
that was a highlight of our chat with Ieva and Jethro. Well, Ieva of Ieva and Jethro. You're listening to The Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and this is the Rock All Morning Band with On the TV.
And made them louder to amplify the way I felt. Took my tone and made it rounder. Can you imagine what a blow you dealt? Seems strange, almost insanity. It's called reality. Seems odd, almost derisible. Scratch tubes on the TV. On the TV. On the TV. Ooh, on the TV. We'll keep on fighting till we've won. Sing our famous fighting song. We'll fight together, join the fun, and polish off the scratches gone. Insanity, it's called reality. Seems sad, almost derisible. Scratch tubes on the TV. On the TV. On the TV. Ooh, on the TV. We'll keep on fighting till we won. thoughts and made them louder.
That was On the TV by the Rockall Morning Band. You're listening to the Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain. And it's time for us to crack on with our highlight shows. We are in conversation with drummer Sophie Reed.
Awesome. Cool. And I mean, speaking of cool projects, so you were recently at the National Film and Television School. What were you doing there?
So they often do, in fact, every year they do courses where they basically have to film something a bit like Top of the Pops. Mm-hmm. So multiple cameras, they're filming a band, different angles. Obviously, there's someone else on the floor and there's someone else in like the producing chair telling them what cameras to cut to. Sorry. So I am part of a band. I create a band basically. Get us all together. We learn a couple of songs. Send that over, so they've got, obviously they can kind of script it a little bit, and whatever the course is, so the students might just be doing camera that day, or they might be in the producer's chair, or doing audio, or all of it. So we're just there basically to be that band that they film, get all their different angles, and they learn, from that. Obviously, because they've got tutors there as well that guide them. Yes, it's a great day. I love doing those days. This time round, there was also a second day, and it kind of integrated a talk show and live band. So you think of like, trying to think of something now. So
any late night show, yeah.
Basically. So they'd have to cut straight. They do the talk show bit, cut straight to the band. We play the first song, then go straight back, and then they talk a bit more, then come back, and we'd finish off the show. So it's actually, I've never done that before previously, because I've been doing it for, I think, 3 or so years now. And it was really interesting to see that point of it as well. And for me to be like on cue and not have red light fever. Obviously, it's pre-recorded. It's not like a live thing. So if you mess up, you mess up. And I'm pretty sure I made quite a few mistakes that day. But we're all human. So it's just a good experience. And the way they teach them and how welcoming and educational that facility is and all the tutors are. It's such a lovely environment and something really cool to be a part of.
Yeah, that was part of our conversation with Sophie Reed, and here we are in conversation with horror author Todd Wittenmyer.
Oh, and when did how did you get your start with writing? Can you remember the first thing you sort of ever wrote that you took seriously?
Yeah, it would be back in 1987. I decided if I was going to get anywhere. I mean, I goofed around in school, elementary school and whatnot, wrote stories because we had to. But I sat down and wrote a poem, and then I started with the short stories and finally got up the courage to try a full-length novel. And that's kind of how that process went. I guess I took baby steps. And I don't know if it's the same for everybody. I don't know. I don't know how anybody just jumps in and writes a novel without a little training.
Yeah, I think a lot of trial and error for most people, I think.
Oh, yeah. Well, and another thing is, I think that when you first start out, you normally emulate your favorite authors, and then you got to find your own voice.
Yeah.
Or that's ideally, I think, what people should do.
Yeah, that's the thing to work towards. Yeah. And so who are some of your favorite authors?
Harlan Ellison, Stephen King, Ellen Dean Foster, how much I think Edward. I like Children of Time. I got these books here so I can look at them. And believe it or not, man, I started the Clan of the Cave Bear and liked the first couple books. And honestly, I don't know if you can leave this on your show, but it got to where it was almost caveman pornography. And I'm like, yeah, I think I'm done with that series unless they change the complexion of the thing. Hemingway. Oh, and by the way, man, I finally got around to reading Fever Dream by George R.R. Martin.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome vampire novel, man. It's right up there with my favorite.
That was really good. Yeah, that one. There's one of the ones, because I mean, I think we remember we did a buddy read of Dying of the Light, didn't we?
Dying of the Light.
And that one not so good. That one was weird as well, because I got that copy used online and it was signed by George R.R. Martin, and I've still got it, because I can't sell the damn thing. Nobody wants it, presumably because they've read the book and they know it wasn't very good. But yeah, Fever Dream was excellent.
That was a highlight of our chat with horror author Todd Wittenmyer. And here we have a highlight of our chat with the MLN Ensemble. Well, one of the things I wanted to ask you guys, and I think part of it you have just answered in terms of the wide variety of different musical influences that that you guys touch upon. But I think there may be a perception amongst some people of jazz as you think of, when I think of jazz anyway, my immediate thoughts are like, the Roaring Twenties and jazz bars and sort of that scene there. And I wondered, like, how do you think jazz stays relevant in today's day and age, in a world of SoundCloud rappers and TikTok musicians and stuff? How can jazz stay relevant?
Do you want to go first, Steph?
Me? Oh, well, I would dare to say jazz stays relevant by absorbing the influences from around it. So that UK jazz sound that I'm talking about, these are kids. I say kids, they're kind of like the generation I'm talking about are like maybe 5 to 7 years older than us. So how dare I call them kids? But anyway, they're the kind of people who grew up listening to pirate radio, grew up listening to jungle. And you can't help but have that come into what you do. Not that he's a British artist, but someone we very much admire is a keyboardist called Robert Glasper, and he's done a lot of work with hip-hop artists. It's funny that world has kind of come full circle, where in the 80s and 90s, hip-hop artists were sampling jazz records, and then what you find is that contemporary jazz musicians are then inviting rappers to come back on and play live with them. So there's a lot of cross-pollination there. In staying in touch with what's current, jazz is very much keeping itself alive. It's just that you wouldn't necessarily know it as jazz if you put it next to John Coltrane or Frank Sinatra. And indeed, we've run into that running our monthly jam nights in High Wycombe. Cheeky little plug, the Catch 22 jam nights, last Saturday of every month at the front room. Sorry, I had to do that. That's all right. We've had people come through who want to jam with us, and they want to do the old stuff, which we will do, and then they listen to the rest of the night and go, "What's that? What do you call that? That's not jazz." I was like, "Well, yeah, it is. It's just your record collection is a little out of date, sir." So it's an interesting. Jazz is in an interesting place right now for sure.
Yeah, I mean, look at I immediately thought, when you asked that question, I immediately thought about Ezra Collective, because they recently won the Mercury Prize, didn't they?
Absolutely.
And you just think, well, clearly it's still very much relevant. It's not exactly a dead genre. But then again, people love to say that, they say rock and roll is dead, and then you still have like metal albums reaching #1. So I think that there's still a lot of relevance in today's world. And I think to sort of almost to summarize what Steph was saying, I think the fact that it borrows and steals and takes from so many other genres and blends it into itself, that's what makes it really special and really exciting, and keeps it relevant, because it's not this, as you were saying earlier, this sort of Roaring Twenties pigeonhole. There's so much more to it than that. And, again, speaking for myself, like I said earlier, that's something that I discovered playing this kind of music and playing with great musicians like Steph and Matt and all the guests that we get to play with, because it's not something I would ever think about. It's not my background. But when you get to play that, you realize, there's so much more relevance here than you would otherwise suspect. Yeah, for sure.
Unless we forget...
Sorry, you go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry, there's a bit of a lag there, but apologies. I was going to say, just a quick one, and I know I always talk about this on the mic at our jam nights, but lest we forget, what we think of as classic jazz was actually contemporary pop music of the day, and bored musicians would then go and improvise on what you would think of as, the popular songs of the era, and that's what jazz needs to do to stay alive, and that's one of the things we do. We'll take Lizzo, Dua Lipa, whatever, and riff on it, and it becomes jazz. Jazz is a mindset, if you'll forgive the cliche.
That's actually a very good point, because we've done, especially at Catch 22 jams, we've done a lot of covers, but we've jazzified them, and people love it, man. Like, you hear a song that you recognize, you think, "Oh, I know this song," but it's so totally different and wrapped up, so packaged so differently. But people love that kind of stuff. It's, and it's really cool to sort of almost rebrand a genre, I guess, because you're taking something people are very familiar with, but you're presenting it in what to a lot of people is a completely new and different way they've never heard before. And I find that's really good fun, because I wouldn't necessarily listen to a lot of popular chart music myself, but being able to play it in this jazzified way is not only really good fun to play, but it's also great when you see people really enjoying themselves as well.
That was the highlight of our chat with the MLN Ensemble. So you're listening to the Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and this is Nick Coleman with Streets Ahead.
Ahead, these streets I tread, I trudge instead. These streets I tread, best left unsaid, misread instead. This human head. No jobs misled, no fixed homestead. Thread, no loaf of bread, brain dead, drugged head, unfairness head, sore head, big head, good times ahead, look ahead, roof overhead. Redness, brick red, skinhead, he sees red, woebegone redhead, life gone on the riverbed. No meds, tight beds, a pipe dream made bed. All hope is shed. Clean hospital bed, no more drop dead. The resting place, deathbed in a common grave. Live bed.
You're listening to The Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and it's time for us to head over to the Ilk Shed now to catch up with Twangling Jack Ford for this week's album review.
Hex Induction Hour. The Fall. They say it's grim up north, and the likes of northerners like the late Marquis Smith of The Fall seem determined to keep it that way. In the world of Marquis Smith, everything is a protest. Shambolic playing is a protest against blandness. His unique vocal stylings that are mostly tuneless rants are an effective way to deliver acerbic rhetoric. Though he often sounds like the drunk you never see in The Rover's Return, who gets politely told he has had enough and is pointed in the direction of the cold, wet Weatherfield night. The Fall were always on John Pill's radio show. So much so that I think I stopped taking any notice. It all seemed to just be a northern bloke making no attempt to put any kind of melody into his singing, over jagged post-punk guitars all played over a fairly standard drum beat. But if you delve a bit deeper, Marquis Smith is not just a curmudgeonly singer, but also the leader of the band, and starts to look a bit more like a Captain Beefheart wayward genius, forever forcing his musicians to avoid the obvious, the commercial and the comforting, to create something uneasy and revolutionary. Much of their early work works only as an alternative to what was current, but on Hex Induction Hour, everything they were doing seems to come together. It is helped by having two drummers that keep a very solid beat, sometimes a bit tribal, and in one case 4 on the floor northern soul. Along with a solid bass, it gives credence to the meme that says a rock band is a rhythm section backing various novelty acts. It starts with the classical, which is very much a Fall classic. The drums thunder, the guitars are savage, like the sound of ploughshares being ground into swords. It is beautifully chaotic. It is the sound of musicians finding something that only they had a vague idea of what they were looking for. It stirs up feelings you never knew you had. It satisfies something in your lizard brain. The rawness of the production is a predictable reaction to smooth 80s production. It was recorded partly in a studio in Iceland and partly in a disused cinema in Hitchin. It was produced by a man called Richard Mazda. Richard Mazda performed in a musical I co-wrote. I filmed and recorded it. So my connection is that I produced The Fall's producer. The other high point of the album is Hip Priest, which is like their version of The End by The Doors. It builds to some quite scary climaxes, which might be why it was used in the film Silence of the Lambs. Hex Induction Hour. The Fall.
Big thank you to Twangling Jack Ford for this week's album review. Thank you to everyone whose music I've shared. Thank you to everyone whose highlights I've shared. As always, you can find us on Facebook. If you search for The Archer on Wickham Sound, you should be able to find us. We are repeated on Wickham Sound on Monday nights. We're on the Wickham Sound Listen Again, iTunes, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Please do leave us a short review on your podcast platform of choice. It all helps. You can find us on Facebook if you search for The Archer on Wickham Sound. And you can also reach out to me here at the studio on dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. That's dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. I'm particularly keen to hear from poets, performers, musicians, people with MP3s to share, people with local arts news. Don't hesitate to get in touch. So I'm going to leave you with one last tune. This is Alice Jane with Wait. I'll catch you next week.